at Miles, you went to Miles in 50?
It was in 1955. We started September of...
55.
No, I'm jumping ahead. We finished high school in 52.
Right.
I finished in 55.
Right.
52, we started September 52.
Right.
I finished mine in 55.
Now, this was a rather momentous period, those 3 years from 52 to 55, because during that period, of course, Brown versus Board took place, and the Montgomery bus boycott was about to take place, had taken place. Were there any activities at Miles at that time related to civil rights?
No.
That early?
There was none at that time. The president of the school at that time was Dr. Bayonne.
Right.
And of course, later on when things start happening, it brings out, you know, what's in a person.
Right.
But nothing was happening at that time.
Okay, so in 55, after 55, what did you do? After you left Miles?
Yeah, we went to Purdue University then. Right. I stayed at Purdue University for 2 years on a master's degree.
Yes.
To 57.
Okay.
And then in September 57, I came back from Miles and I started teaching at Miles then.
Okay. So then that is the period that you then would become involved to some extent?
No. It was not until I taught at Miles from 57 until about, it was in 65. I went for 1 year at Kansas State University. Then at Howard University, I got my degree then and came back to Miles in 67.
Okay.
And so that's when.
Now, the movement established, well, Fred Shuttlesworth established the movement in 1956.
That's
and
right.
From 56 to 63, there were a number of things that
were
going on.
Yeah, sure.
And I guess the most, well, of course, is Home being bombed, Christmas of 1956. And then 57, he attempted to get his children enrolled at Phillips High School. But by 1960 and 61, when things were really starting to heat up, you had the sit-ins and the freedom rides. Right. And then in 1962, the Miles College students, and I'm sure that you were involved in this, got involved in a selective buying campaign.
Right.
Can you talk about how did you initially get involved in the movement?
Okay, I was at the first meeting when John Patterson, I think, was the governor of Alabama. He succeeded in outlawing, effectively banning the NAACP. And I was at the meeting when Reverend Shuttlesworth, I think we was at the old A.G. Gaston Funeral Home building. That's not too far from here, right around the corner. We had the initial meeting to form the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights. And then later on, we participated in the meeting when Reverend Shuttlesworth wanted to test segregation on buses in Birmingham. I was at that meeting, and I remember when we all signed pledges or agreements that we would not participate in any violence. We would not strike back if we were struck. And we had our designated points where we would board the bus in downtown Birmingham and ride. But since I lived in Fairfield, I boarded what they call 41 Express that went from Birmingham down 3rd Avenue north up to Fairfield. And I boarded at where I think Parisian at that time was located, one of the department stores.
Second Avenue.
Down Second Avenue over there. And when the driver got down to the, what we call the car barn, where the Birmingham Transit used to own, I think that Adam Hotel, they call it now, is located there. But anyway, the only people, I sat in the front of the bus. I made sure the whites were behind me as well as in front of me. The only persons who started kind of mumbling, of course, was coming from the back of the bus, you know. So the driver stopped, and when he got to the car barn on 3rd Avenue and about 14th Street, I heard him when he said, you know, we got a smart nigga on the bus. And he got off as if he's going into the office. I guess he thought I was going to get up and move, you know. So we stayed there, and finally he came back.
Just you alone?
I was the only one who was up front in an integrated fashion. And we had been instructed what to do, take a name if we saw it, a number if we saw the badge, whatever. And of course, we did that. He said, oh, I see he can write, you know. But when he came back, he didn't say anything. So I rode the bus. I got off in Fairfield.
Now, was this approximately what year?
That was about, I would say, around when he was testing that. It must have been about 57.
Okay, this is prior to, okay, yeah.
Yeah, sometime.
This is really the initial
yeah.
testing of the buses.
Right, that was the initial. So I rode, I was not arrested. Now, later on, I learned there was about 13 students from my house. Some of them was arrested because I had a first cousin. When they went, he was one of those who was arrested. That incident, I remember the bombing of Reverend Shellsworth Church over there when that occurred also. I remember when he was beaten with chains in Phillips High School down there. Now the movement was meeting at various churches, church to church. Now my mother, my father, and I had an uncle. We all would go to the meetings on Monday nights.
Did they get you involved? Did you get them involved?
Well, they kind of got me involved. They loved the meeting. They admired Reverend Shellsworth. And Reverend Shellsworth was just a man. He instilled courage into those who was following, because he seemed to have been just fearless. And through all of that, he kept some humor in it also.
Yeah. Now, this period where that is evolving here to develop this movement was sort of centered around the mass meetings. Yeah. If you were to try to explain to children today what a mass meeting was like, how would you explain?
Well, I would say this mass meeting was the result of people being oppressed, all people, regardless as to how much money they had, regardless as to the extent of their education. You were just a black person, you were just a Negro. So we all felt the pains. And it was not difficult then to get our people to come out to the meeting. But there was a faithful few. There were so many who didn't participate. There was many who claim now that they did, and they didn't. Over the years, you know, I've seen things, people pass on and they claim they did things, they were involved, but those who were really there know that they were not, you know. Right. And some things they said happened really didn't happen. But at that time, there were some churches that even Reverend Shellsworth couldn't go to. And I remember one meeting when Reverend Shellsworth and Dr. Gaston almost fought at the meeting. Dr. Gaston, he admitted that he was afraid, but he put his money out. But it was a difference in how Shellsworth was moving, doing things. It's right here, Reverend Church down here, Metropolitan, AME Zion, I think. They almost got into blows. And there was a dentist in Fairfield at that time, Dr. I can't think of his name, Wilt or something like that. He was at the Nixon building where he was a young dentist, black guy, and he all came between them. You know.
Why did they almost get into it?
It was a difference of kind of philosophy, you know. Shellsworth wanted to move, and I think Dr. Gasson was a little slower, you know, about moving. Of course, we could understand that from a business perspective, you know, how, and it got a little heated, and that's what it was, got into a heated argument, and they had to be separated.
Did others participate in that? Was there a business cadre and then the movement people, or how did that stack up?
You know,
or was it just a strong
that was kind of just one his part. It was not such business as such. But now let me tell you how the business came in when Dr. Pitts assumed the presidency of Myers College. And this is when you first got it started having dialogue between the white community and the black community. I'm gonna tell you, with men like B. Roper Dial, I remember him, I think he was with Seals Roebuck. Emil Hess, I remember him, he was with Parisian. There was another man, James Head, who had a business down there. They would meet at what is now the church Cathedral of the Advent, kind of secret meeting. And at that time, you know, blacks and whites couldn't even meet together.
Right. It's against the law.
Yeah, they had these meetings, and Dr. Pitts, you know, they was trying to establish a dialogue. But those were the whites I remember who were initially involved. They were considered to be kind of level-headed, you know.
And you were a faculty member at Miles. Were you involved?
Yeah, I was a faculty member at Miles at that time.
So Miles then would play a rather significant role.
They did. They did.
With Dr. Pitts and
yeah,
yourself and other faculty.
With Dr. Pitts' blessing and with Dr. Pitts' encouragement. And I was the faculty advisor to the students. Frank Dooch was the president of the Student Government Association. And we started, well, the word boycott you couldn't use because they had outlawed boycott, you know, so we just called it selective buying campaign. And we had an old memographing machine down in the print room where we would print out leaflets, maybe 1,000 of these leaflets, encouraging our people not to shop here. Why spend $3,500 in this section and you can't spend 35 cents for a hot dog in this section, you know?
What actually initiates this campaign, the selective buying campaign? Is it simply because blacks could not sit at the lunch counter?
Right.
Or were there other reasons as well?
No, they could not sit at the lunch counters. You could not eat at those department stores downtown. Even if you spent $50,000 in another section, you could not go and spend 50 cents to buy a hamburger at their lunch counter.
Someone said that this same time, Miles was attempting to raise funds for the college. Students were attempting to raise funds. And either one of the governments or someone decided that that was illegal, you could not do that, and that created some animosity between Miles College students and those officials. Is that any place, you remember anything about that?
When you say
a capital campaign that was going on, and students were going from door to door, and I guess it must have either Birmingham or Fairfield, Birmingham police or something intervened and said that they could not do that.
Now, I don't remember that, but we did have a campaign to raise funds, I remember. But that didn't bother Dr. Pitts one bit, because I think that first.
Oh, I didn't mean the Miles College officialdom. I'm talking about the white officialdom.
Oh.
Saying, and that seemed, from what I understood, that middle class people saw this as, black middle class saw this as being an attempt by the white status quo to undermine the efforts of Miles College. So that brought them into the picture.
Right, because, you know, they were doing everything to thwart our advances. It was similar to down in the black belt, when Negroes manifested an interest in voting, the whites would put them off the plantation, the sharecropper. Sort of same thing. The money would dry up during those financial campaigns, but at the same time, someone else would come in, you know, some northerner, someone to make a contribution. I remember when a man, I can't think of his name, came from Harvard University just to help his college, you know. But you know, Dr. Pitts had he was kind of charismatic, and whites as well as blacks. And I never will forget when he told me, by the way, when we got those leaflets, we would put them out at churches at night. And usually we would do it on Saturday night. Some of the churches would be open. And if they was open, we would go in and place them in the pews to make sure that the parishioners would get them. Some would place on the pulpit, you know. And I remember the word came to me, there was one church, Green Liberty Baptist Church. Their pastor was kind of conservative. He was an elderly man. I understand that he had made the statement, if that Miles College professor come here again, somebody had told him, you know, who had been there, he was going to have him arrested. But as far as we were concerned, it was just war, you know. And we wanted the people to stay out of the stores. Now, sometimes we started some things that was not true. Like we said, well, an elderly lady they beat her when she got off the bus, you know, it was started. But it was effective in keeping some from the stores. And that effort really hurt the merchants. And finally, when Dr. King came, they were about ready then. Things were right. Because that selective buying campaign was effective. The boycott of those stores was effective, so that when Dr. King came in spring and started the demonstration, that just, you know.
So then the student activism really prepares the rest of Birmingham for what would take place in 1963.
That's true. Those merchants were about ready when Dr. King came here and started those demonstrations.
I know there were efforts, well, they refused, the business community refused to acknowledge the presence of the movement and Fred Shuttlesworth, right? They wouldn't talk to them.
Right.
I heard that they, in fact, sent a delegation to Atlanta to converse with Martin Luther King rather than talking with Fred.
Yeah, right.
And then Martin Luther King sent them back to talk to the movement here.
Right. It's just you mentioned that their refusal to talk with Shuttle. You may not realize it. I don't know whether they ever told you, but at that time we didn't even have a black attorney who would file these cases for Fred Shuttlesworth. I remember they had to get a black attorney out of Jacksonville, Florida, who would come up here. I don't recall his name, and had to associate with someone here and file these cases to desegregate.